Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. I think it's April 11th. I do know it's the night before Easter and the shelter in place is still among us. And I just want to say thank you really quick to those of you watching and those of you who engage with me and share my content and give me feedback. I really do appreciate it. Now, typically what I do at the beginning of every video is I recap for about a minute or two what was said the previous week. And I'm not going to do that because it just takes up too much time and I end up having to edit along the way and cut things out. What I do want to mention though is that this is episode 18 and I've been doing this since January and I'm still going strong. We've talked about content, we've talked about analytics, influencers, back to measuring PR. And today we're transitioning into a little bit of measuring social media because we've talked about share of voice and share of coverage. We're going to talk about share of conversation today. And it's a very basic concept. You take any topic or conversation that you or your brand wants to be a part of, and you measure that conversation first. Now, the data source for you depends upon what you want to measure. It could be just Reddit, it could be other forums, it could be blogs, or it could be social. Now, right now, most of the platforms are kind of struggling with pulling data from other platforms outside of Twitter, and that is perfectly okay. Twitter for B2B brands is huge. Take any conversation, any technical conversation, any business related topic, and I guarantee you there are hundreds, if not thousands of conversations as it relates to those topics. And the methodology for doing this is identical to pulling share of coverage. Our data set is different though. We're looking at social media conversations, right? So take for example, the topic of artificial intelligence. You pull every mention of AI and artificial intelligence and also synonyms into your data set. And that data set could be through Brandwatch or NetBase or Synthesio or you name it. You select your date range and that is going to be your data set. It could be a quarter, it could be a year, it could be last month, it could be yesterday. That is the data set that you will measure your brand against as well as your competitors. And the math, well, that's the same too. You take total count or total mentions of your business and your brand and you calculate that against your competitors and that is your share of conversation. Now, the problem with this approach is that especially with Twitter, people just like to say things, right? They will share anything. In some cases, there's not a lot of depth in the conversation, right? Sometimes it could be a marketing person sharing an article about a topic that he or she may or may not care about. And so you're getting mentions from people that don't matter. Now I say that and I don't mean it that they don't matter. What I mean is they're not important to you from an audience standpoint. Maybe they're not your customer or they're not somebody like an influencer or journalist. It's just a random person. It could even be a bot in many cases. Now I want to transition to what I call share of audience attention. Now I think we can all agree that attention today is at a premium. It doesn't come cheap and it doesn't come easy. And it makes sense, right? There's so much media that surrounds us. We're multitasking. We're doing so many things. In fact, I'm more busy now with the shelter in place than I was, 2-3 months ago. So as a brand, that is your challenge. You have to break through the clutter and make sure that you're reaching audiences that matter to you and with a message that resonates with them and of course aligns to your business. The core pillar of this metric, share of audience attention, rests upon one single factor. And that single factor is audience intelligence. It means building an audience first before you analyze a conversation or a behavior. Now, I talked a lot about this in the first 3 or 4 episodes of this video series when I talked about the difference between social listening and audience listening or audience intelligence. And from there, the math and methodology is pretty much the same. You build your audience, you pull them into your platform. Again, you can use pretty much any social intelligence platform that's on the market today. And you select your date range and you filter for conversations. You filter and understand what are they saying about your brand and your business. And that is share of audience attention. It's how relevant are you to this audience? How relevant is your competitors to this audience? And if they are talking about your competitors more than they're talking about you, what's the context, right? What are they saying? Was it a product launch? Was it a white paper that was released? Maybe they activated an influencer program. So share of audience attention is, in my opinion, probably one of the best metrics for not just measuring share of coverage or share of voice or how important you are. More importantly, it's measuring what's important to them. Because when you can do that, you can start to use that intelligence and filter that back into the organization. Maybe your team's responsible for creating content or pitching media, and you use those insights to create content, right? You match and you replicate the topics and keywords and things that are important to them into what you're doing from a marketing perspective. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say you built an audience of 50,000 people and you want to understand how often you were talked about in January. So you select your date range, you filter out the conversations about your business, and that's your number, right? You look at your competitive numbers and you figure out and calculate what your share of conversation is within that audience, what I would call share of audience attention. Now, counting numbers is great, right? It's great to see how relevant you are amongst an audience versus your competitors. I would take it another step further, and I would analyze the context of the conversation. What exactly are they saying about you? Why are they mentioning your competitor more than you? Maybe your competitor had launched a product, or maybe they activated an influencer program. So the context is a lot more important than just a number, but the number is a great starting point because it gives you a really quick snapshot on how relevant you are to people who actually matter to you. In this case, it could be developers or people interested in fashion and travel and living in a particular industry or geography. So to take it further than that, you can also analyze anything that they're talking about. It doesn't have to be about or within the context of your brand. It could be about a topic like music or politics or business or technology. Because when you're looking at an audience, you're not pulling in conversations per se. You're pulling in people and their conversations over the course of time. And to me, this is the most effective way to determine how relevant you are to a given audience. Now, I want to just touch on one other thing before we close today. And I briefly mentioned it a few minutes ago. Your audience doesn't necessarily have to be your customers or prospects. Your audience could be just about anyone who's important to you. It could be a set of politicians, for example, or maybe the top journalists who are talking about AI or fashion or travel or DevOps. Or it could be a set of 10 influencers who you're tracking, maybe 100 influencers. So don't limit yourself to one specific group. You can look at these groups individually, or you can put them into one database and track them all at the same time. The important thing to remember is looking at audiences first and building that audience is the key step in not just share of audience attention. In my opinion, it's the key step in all analytics, because when you understand your customers and what they care about, your audience rather, and what they care about and who they follow and what they're talking about and what they have an affinity for, that is huge competitive advantage for you when you're building and launching programs in the marketplace. So thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a great week. Stay healthy, stay safe, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.